Namaskaram, life is not happening to you, it is happening because of you. The quality of your life is not determined by what is around you, but by what is within you. So, before you go around fixing the world, first, let's look at a few things you must stop immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, immediately, if you want to live with clarity, peace and power. The mind is a beautiful instrument. It is capable of creating poetry, solving problems, building worlds, and even connecting with the very essence of existence. But when left unmanaged, it can also become your biggest obstacle. Overthinking is one of the most subtle yet destructive patterns that the modern human being has adopted. It masquerades as intelligence, but in reality it is often just noise. A mind that is constantly analyzing, dissecting, projecting and replaying is not functioning at its highest capability. It is caught in a loop, a cycle that takes you away from the immediacy of life. What most people call thinking is not conscious thought. It is compulsive activity. The mind is running because you have not told it to sit. It is like a child scribbling on the walls, not because it is painting a masterpiece, but because nobody taught it how to hold a brush. Overthinking is this kind of undirected mental activity. It is not clarity, it is not insight, it is just movement. And all movement is not progress. Many people confuse worry for wisdom. They believe that by going over a problem 100 times in their heads, they are somehow getting closer to a solution, but often they are just going in circles. A simple issue becomes a complex web of imagined outcomes, emotional overlays, and fear-based prediction. Life is simple. It's the mind that makes it complicated. Overthinking adds layers to life that were never there to begin with. Thoughts are like clouds. They are meant to pass. When you hold on to them, when you keep pulling one thought after another without pause, you create a storm where there could have been stillness. There is nothing wrong with thinking, but it must happen consciously. If you cannot stop thinking, then it is no longer a tool in your hands, it has become your master. This compulsiveness is not just mental, it becomes emotional. The more you think, the more you feel. The more you feel, the more you react. The more you react, the more you create situations that confirm your thoughts. It's a loop, a cycle, and the only way to break it is through awareness. To realize that thinking is not happening to you, it is happening through you. And what happens through you can be guided if you are willing to step back and observe. Let us take a very simple example. You are sitting in your room and someone said something unpleasant to you earlier in the day. The moment is gone, the person is gone, but in your mind you are playing it over and over. Why did they say that? What did they mean? I should have said this. Next time I will say that. The situation becomes bigger in your mind than it was in reality. Hours pass, maybe even days, and you are still caught in a moment that lasted a few seconds. That is the power of overthinking. It turns memories into monsters and possibilities into fears. This also drains your energy. The human system, when in balance, is vibrant and alive, but constant mental noise consumes that energy. People feel exhausted not because of the physical activity they do, but because of the mental burden they carry. A body that works all day will still rest at night, but a mind that runs all day will not let you sleep. Insomnia, anxiety, fatigue. They are not always caused by the outside world. Most often they are self-created through unchecked mental activity. The irony is, the more you think, the less you live. You may be surrounded by beauty, but you won't see it. You may have opportunities, but you will hesitate. You may have relationships, but you will question them. Overthinking puts a filter on your perception. It doesn't let you see life as it is. It makes you see life as your fears, doubts, and insecurities project it to be. This is why the ability to stay present is so essential. The present moment has no room for overthinking. It is fresh, alive, unburdened by past regrets and future worries. When you are truly in the now, the mind becomes still, not because you forced it, but because there is nothing to churn. The moment you observe the flower, the child's smile, the wind on your skin, thinking stops, awareness begins. It is not about suppressing your thoughts. It is about becoming conscious of them. When you realize that not every thought needs your attention, you naturally begin to choose where your focus goes. Most thoughts are not worthy of your time. They are repetitive, irrelevant, and often rooted in past conditioning. By watching them without reacting, you begin to weaken their hold. Slowly, the chatter reduces, clarity arises, presence deepens. People ask, "How do I stop overthinking?" The answer is not to fight with your thoughts. Fighting makes them stronger. The answer is to step out of the loop, to anchor yourself in your breath, your body, your senses, anything that connects you with the now. The more rooted you are in this moment, the less power the mind has to pull you elsewhere. A clear mind is not one that thinks a lot. It is one that knows when to think and when to simply be. If you can create a little space between you and your thoughts, you will see that life is not as complicated as your mind makes it out to be. Reality is simple. It is the psychological drama that is complex, and that drama ends when you stop overthinking and start being. Beyond the moment we are born, we begin absorbing the world around us. Words, gestures, expressions, rewards, rejections. All of these experiences begin shaping our sense of self. Slowly, without realizing it, we start to value ourselves through the lens of others. We begin seeking approval. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. And at some point, this simple desire transforms into a constant need for validation. It becomes so ingrained in us that we begin to live our entire lives trying to be what others want us to be. This is one of the most silent forms of suffering. You dress a certain way because it's trending. You speak a certain way because it pleases others. You pursue goals not because they stir your soul, but because they make you look good. It is not wrong to be appreciated. It is not wrong to enjoy acknowledgement. But when your self-worth depends on it, you become a slave to opinions. The problem with seeking validation is that it creates a fractured self. There's who you are, and then there's who you pretend to be. The more you try to meet others' expectations, the further you drift from your own truth. And slowly, you forget who you really are. You become an actor on a stage, performing roles for applause, approval, and attention, while inside there is confusion and restlessness. A person who constantly looks outward for validation loses the capacity to look inward for authenticity. What makes this dangerous is that validation is addictive. When someone praises you, it feels good, it gives you a momentary high, but like any addiction, the effect wears off quickly and you begin to crave it again. So you repeat the behavior, you filter your words, you hide your feelings, you silence your truth. And all of it just to maintain an image that others will accept. But an image is not a life. You cannot live fully while pretending. There is an inner cost to external validation. Every time you ignore your intuition to please someone else, a small part of you dims. Every time you compromise your values to fit in, your integrity takes a hit. And over time, this cost becomes heavy. You begin to feel hollow. You feel unfulfilled, even when everything on the outside looks perfect. That hollowness is your soul reminding you, this is not who you are. The world will always have opinions. People will praise you one day and criticize you the next. If you keep dancing to their tunes, you will never find your rhythm. Seeking validation puts your peace of mind in someone else's hands. And no matter how much effort you make, it is never enough. There will always be someone who disapproves. There will always be someone who thinks you should be different. Trying to satisfy everyone is not kindness. It is self-betrayal. The freedom begins when you stop looking outside and start listening inside. Your inner compass is far more reliable than the fluctuating approval of others. There is a certain dignity in standing in your truth, even if no one claps for you. To be rooted in yourself is to become unshakable. You are no longer moved by praise nor disturbed by judgment. You simply are, and that being is your power. This is not arrogance, it is not ego, it is a quiet confidence that comes from self-awareness. When you know who you are, you do not need others to tell you. Their words may be kind, but they are not your foundation. You are not against appreciation, but you are no longer dependent on it. Your sense of self becomes like a mountain, grounded, still, unshaken by passing storms. People often fear that if they stop seeking validation, they will become disconnected or unloved. But the opposite is true. When you're authentic, when you express who you really are, you attract people who resonate with that truth. Your relationships become deeper, more real. You stop attracting those who love your mask and start meeting those who value your essence. And these connections are far more fulfilling than any performance-based admiration. You also begin to access your creativity more freely. When you are not worried about being judged, you can explore your ideas without fear. You can take risks. You can grow. The most powerful art, innovation, and change come from people who were not afraid to be different. They were not waiting for the world to say yes. They had already said yes to themselves. That inner permission is what moves the world. It is important to reflect how much of what I do is genuinely me and how much is just a performance for others. If you find that your choices are driven by the need to be liked, recognized, or applauded, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, who am I without all of this? What would I do if no one was watching? What feels true to me, even if it doesn't make sense to others? Living without the need for validation does not mean you become insensitive or isolated. It simply means you become centered, you listen to feedback, but it doesn't define you. You enjoy praise, but it doesn't inflate you. You face criticism, but it doesn't destroy you. You're no longer a puppet to opinions. You become the author of your life. And in that authorship, you find a sense of peace and power that no one can give you and no one can take away. Blame is one of the most instinctive reactions a human being has. Something goes wrong, and the first impulse is to find someone or something to hold responsible. It's almost automatic. If something doesn't work out the way we expected, the tendency is to point fingers at the people around us, at the circumstances, at the system, even at fate or the stars. Rarely do we pause to look within. Rarely do we ask, what is my role in this? This habit of blaming is not just a behavioral flaw. It is a profound barrier to growth, clarity, and true freedom. When you blame others, you are essentially saying, I have no control. You are declaring that your life, your emotions, your actions, your peace, everything is in someone else's hands. It may give you a temporary sense of relief, a moment of self-righteousness, but it robs you of the very power that makes you human, the ability to choose, to respond, to transform. Every time you blame, you give away your strength. You shrink your potential by becoming a victim of external forces. There is a subtle comfort in blaming. It shields the ego. It prevents us from facing uncomfortable truths about ourselves. If you can say it was their fault, then you don't have to reflect. You don't have to accept responsibility. You can remain in the illusion that you were right all along. But comfort is not the same as growth. Growth begins where excuses end, and blame, at its core, is just an excuse dressed up in justification. This pattern starts early. A child breaks something and says it wasn't me. A student fails and blames the teacher. An employee underperforms and blames the boss. A partner feels unfulfilled and blames the relationship. The moment you adopt this habit, you stop evolving. Because in your mind, the problem is always out there. And if the problem is out there, then the solution must be too. You sit and wait, hoping someone else will change, someone else will fix things, someone else will make it right. But life doesn't work that way. If you want to move forward, you must take charge of your own experience. Responsibility does not mean guilt. It does not mean you are to blame for everything that happens. But it does mean that you are willing to own your part. You are willing to ask, what can I learn from this? What could I have done differently? How can I respond now consciously rather than react unconsciously? This is not weakness. This is power. A person who accepts responsibility, even in the face of difficulty, becomes unshakable. Because they are not waiting for the world to change, they are changing themselves. Blame also creates separation. The moment you accuse, you create distance. Whether in a friendship, a family, or a community, blame builds walls. It turns people into enemies. Even when the original issue was small, it feeds resentment, anger, and ego. On the other hand, when you drop blame and step into accountability, connection becomes possible. Communication opens up. Empathy enters. Healing begins. Not just between you and others, but within yourself. It's important to see how blame affects your internal world. When you're constantly looking for someone to hold responsible, your mind becomes restless. Your heart becomes heavy. You carry emotional baggage that doesn't serve you. Blame is not just an act. It is a mental pattern. And like all patterns, the more you repeat it, the stronger it becomes. Soon you're not just blaming others, you start blaming yourself in a destructive way. You begin to live in guilt, shame, or self-hate. This is the other extreme of blame, and it is just as toxic. True responsibility is balanced. It is neither blaming others nor condemning yourself. It is seeing clearly. It is saying, this is the situation, these are the facts, here is what I can do. That clarity is liberating. It takes you out of drama and into awareness. It moves you from reaction to conscious action. Life becomes simpler not because problems disappear, but because you stop wasting energy in denial and accusation. People often say, but I was wronged, I was hurt, they did this to me. And yes, there are situations where others' actions are deeply painful, but even in those cases, you still have a choice. You can either live in that pain forever, constantly replaying the scene and blaming them, or you can acknowledge what happened, feel what you need to feel, and then take ownership of your healing. The pain may not be your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. Blame is easy, it's immediate, but it leads nowhere. Responsibility requires more awareness, it takes effort, but it leads to clarity, strength, and growth. In every situation, ask yourself, what am I doing with this? How am I choosing to respond? What is this teaching me? These are the questions that elevate you from victimhood to leadership, not over others, but over your own life. When you stop blaming, you begin to see life as it is, not as a series of unfair events, but as a constant opportunity for growth and insight. You begin to take your energy back, the same energy that was wasted on justifying, defending, and accusing is now available to create, to build, to evolve. You realize that freedom is not in controlling the world, it is in mastering yourself. There is a silent belief that runs through the minds of many people, the idea that life will begin when the right time comes. We hold back our desires, our dreams, our actions, waiting for that perfect moment when everything will align. When I have more money, then I'll start. When I feel more confident, then I'll speak. When things calm down, then I'll change. This illusion of the right time is one of the greatest barriers to living fully. It is a waiting room with no exit, a place where life is always postponed to some vague future that never really arrives. The idea of the right time is appealing because it removes pressure. It gives us a reason to delay. But underneath that comfort is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of discomfort. We tell ourselves stories to avoid taking risks. We convince ourselves that we are not ready. We think readiness is a destination we will reach someday, but readiness is not something you find, it's something you decide. No one feels completely ready to step into the unknown. Waiting for the right time is often just a sophisticated way of avoiding the discomfort of growth. There is a kind of perfectionism hidden in this waiting. We want to begin only when we are sure everything will go smoothly. But life does not promise certainty, life promises movement. If you only move when the road is clear, you will never leave where you are. Progress requires the willingness to act without all the answers. The truth is, clarity often comes through action, not before it. You figure things out by doing, not by waiting. Time is not something that gives permission. It doesn't suddenly hand you the green light and say, now is the perfect moment. The present moment is always the only moment you truly have. Everything else is a projection. The future is shaped by the choices you make now. If you waste the present planning the perfect future, you lose both. The people who make real change, who build, create, grow, they're not the ones who waited. They're the ones who started, often unsure, often afraid, but with a willingness to try. When you wait, you create resistance. You hold yourself in a state of tension. You think about what could be, but you don't move towards it. This gap between intention and action becomes a source of anxiety. You begin to live in your head, imagining possibilities but never grounding them into reality. The energy that could have been used to build something is spent circling in thought. Waiting becomes a habit, days become weeks, weeks become years, and one day you look back and realize how many moments were lost to hesitation. This doesn't mean reckless action. It doesn't mean jumping without thought, but there's a difference between thoughtful preparation and endless postponement. Preparation is active. It's part of the journey. Postponement is passive. It's standing still while life passes by. Often what we call waiting is not really preparation, it's procrastination dressed in the clothes of planning. We tell ourselves we are being smart, but deep down we know we are just afraid. There is also a tendency to wait for external conditions to change. We think, when things are easier, then I'll start. But external life is never fully in your control. Circumstances will always fluctuate. If your commitment depends on the environment being perfect, your growth will always be at the mercy of chaos. True strength comes from acting even when the environment is uncertain. In fact, that's often when the most powerful shifts happen, not when things are calm, but when they are challenging. Many people also wait for inspiration. They think they need to feel a certain way to act. But inspiration is not a requirement, it's a bonus. Discipline is what moves you when motivation is missing. Some of the most important steps you will take in life will not come from a place of excitement, but from a quiet decision to begin, even when the feeling isn't there. And ironically, that act of beginning often brings the feeling you were waiting for. There's no better time than now, not because now is perfect, but because now is real. The past is memory, the future is imagination. This moment is the only canvas where your actions can actually paint something. When you act now, even in small ways, you begin to shift your trajectory. You create momentum, you break the inertia. You begin to shape your reality instead of being shaped by your hesitation. The longer you wait, the heavier the decision becomes. What starts as a small delay grows into a mountain of resistance. Starting feels harder. Doubt deepens. You begin to question not just the timing but yourself. Self-trust erodes in the silence of waiting. Action, even imperfect action, is the antidote. It restores confidence, it builds inner strength, it proves to you that you can move, even when things aren't perfect. Sometimes people say, but what if I make a mistake? Mistakes are part of movement, you cannot avoid them entirely. But a mistake while moving teaches far more than a mistake made in stillness. Action reveals your path. It shows you what works and what doesn't. Waiting gives you theories. Acting gives you truth. Your life is not meant to be lived in the waiting room. It is meant to be lived in motion, in growth, in presence. The world may not pause for you to feel ready, but you can choose to meet the moment as you are, with what you have. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a sincere step, one step, and then the next. Life meets those who move. One of the most overlooked barriers to inner freedom is the compulsion to control everything around us. There is a constant struggle in many people's lives, not with others, not with circumstances, but with the idea that everything must go exactly as they imagined. The weather must be just right, people must behave a certain way, plans must unfold with precision, and when even the slightest detail shifts outside of that expectation, there is irritation, anxiety, frustration. This need to control arises from fear. At its root, it is the fear of uncertainty, the fear of discomfort, the fear of losing one's grip on how things should be. Control gives a false sense of security. When things go as planned, it creates the illusion that you are in charge, that life is obeying your commands. But this is not how life works. Life is fluid, unpredictable, and alive. It moves in ways the mind cannot always grasp. The more tightly you hold on to how things should be, the more you suffer when they are not. Control becomes a form of mental rigidity. It traps you in a state of resistance, where peace is always postponed until reality matches your preference. People try to control others, what they say, what they do, how they respond. They try to control outcomes, conversations, even emotions. But no matter how clever or powerful someone becomes, there is always something just beyond their reach. A person can organize their schedule down to the minute and still face unexpected events. A person can prepare a speech perfectly and still be misunderstood. The desire for control sets up a war with reality, and in this war, peace is the first casualty. This desire to control also shows up in relationships. You want your partner to act a certain way, your children to behave a certain way, your friends to agree with your views, and when they don't, You feel offended, upset, or even betrayed. But love is not control. Connection is not agreement. True relationships are built not on conformity, but on respect for each other's differences. The moment you begin to control someone else's behavior in the name of love, it stops being love, it becomes manipulation. There is a deep exhaustion that comes from constantly trying to manage what cannot be managed. The mind is always scanning for threats, always calculating, always trying to bend reality to fit its version of how things must be. This creates tension. You wake up in the morning and the mind is already active, already organizing, already protecting its imaginary order. Even small disruptions, traffic, delays, unexpected changes, become sources of stress. This is not because the events are inherently difficult, but because the mind cannot accept that things are not going its way. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean that you stop making plans or taking responsibility. It simply means that you do your part fully, sincerely, and then remain open to how life unfolds. It means acting without attachment to the outcome. It means allowing life to surprise you instead of constantly fearing that surprise. When you drop control, what you gain is presence. You begin to respond instead of react. You become flexible, adaptable, alive to the moment. Control is rooted in the ego. The ego wants to be the master of everything. It wants to define, label, categorize, and predict. But the soul is not interested in control. The soul is interested in experience, in expansion, in discovery. When you live from the ego, you are always fighting. When you live from the soul, you are flowing. You meet each moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. And in that meeting, there is peace. People often say, but if I don't control things, everything will fall apart. This is not true. Life has its own intelligence. Just as your body knows how to breathe without your command, life also knows how to move. There is a deeper rhythm, a natural unfolding that you can tap into, not by force, but by trust. Trust is not blind faith. It is an inner alignment with reality. It is a willingness to engage with life, not dominate it. The paradox is that the more you let go, the more you actually begin to feel in tune. You begin to see opportunities that were invisible when your mind was busy micromanaging. You begin to notice beauty in the unexpected. You begin to discover joy in simplicity. Control narrows your focus. It makes you obsessed with results. Surrender widens your vision. It connects you with something greater than your personal agenda. There is a profound humility in letting go. It is a recognition that you are not the center of the universe, that life was here before you, and it will continue after you. That the sun rises and the moon cycles without your permission. That rivers flow and trees grow without your effort. When you see this, you realize that your task is not to control life, but to participate in it. To contribute, to co-create, to dance with it, not dominate it. Control also isolates. When you're trying to control everything, you live in your head. You are cut off from others, from spontaneity, from trust. You cannot truly connect because connection requires openness, vulnerability, the willingness to not know what comes next. Letting go creates space for magic. It opens the door for moments that are richer than anything you could have planned. Releasing the need to control is one of the most powerful things you can do for your mental and emotional well-being. You stop gripping life so tightly, and in that release, you begin to feel supported by something much larger, a wisdom that does not depend on constant effort, a flow that carries you forward not because you are pushing, but because you have learned how to align. We live in a world full of noise, both external and internal. The external noise comes from the constant barrage of information, from the media, from social networks, from conversations that never seem to end. Everyone has an opinion, everyone wants to be heard, and the world seems to be moving faster than ever before. But perhaps the most subtle and pervasive noise is the internal noise, the constant chatter in our minds, the thoughts, judgments, worries, desires, fears, all of them swirling in a ceaseless loop. This noise is not just an inconvenience, it's a source of deep suffering, and it is something that many of us have come to accept as a natural part of being human. The mind's chatter is often mistaken for who we are. We think that the thoughts we have are a reflection of our true selves. We become so attached to them that we believe them to be facts, to be truths. But the truth is, most of our thoughts are not who we are. They are just random mental patterns, conditioned responses from past experiences, reactions to things that are out of our control. They come and go, but we hold on to them, believing that they define us, believing that they shape our reality. The problem is that when we listen too closely to these thoughts, when we allow them to dictate our actions, we lose touch with who we really are. The mind is designed to protect us, to help us navigate the world, but it often does so in a way that is unhelpful. It runs scenarios of what if endlessly, creating fear about what could happen, whether it's a future that is full of danger or uncertainty. It replays old wounds and regrets, keeping us trapped in the past. It compares us to others, making us feel inferior, inadequate, or envious. This constant internal noise becomes a prison. We become so consumed with the noise in our heads that we lose our ability to live fully in the present moment. We start to make decisions based on fear, not on clarity. We lose touch with our intuition, our deeper sense of knowing, because we are too busy listening to the loud chatter of the mind. The first step in freeing yourself from the noise is recognizing that it is not you. The thoughts that come and go in your mind are not the essence of who you are. They are simply mental phenomena, and just like clouds passing through the sky, they too will eventually pass. The trick is not to attach to them, not to get caught up in them. Instead of identifying with your thoughts, become an observer. Become aware of the thoughts, but don't let them control you. When you can observe your thoughts without judgment, without attachment, you begin to reclaim your peace. You begin to step out of the current of mental noise and into stillness. This awareness does not happen overnight. It takes practice, it takes patience, it requires that you stop running away from silence, stop being afraid of it. In a world that is constantly trying to fill every moment with sound and activity, silence has become an uncomfortable space for many. People fill every moment with distractions, TV, social media, music, anything to avoid facing the quiet. But the silence is where you find clarity. It is where you reconnect with yourself, with your true essence. It is in the silence that you begin to hear the whispers of your soul, the guidance that is always present but often drowned out by the mind's noise. One of the most powerful ways to reduce mental noise is through meditation. Meditation is not about clearing your mind completely, because that is nearly impossible. It is about becoming aware of your thoughts and learning to let them go. It's about training your mind to focus on one point of attention, whether it's your breath, a sound, or a feeling. By doing this, you begin to create a space between you and your thoughts. This space allows you to observe your mind without getting caught in it. With time, you learn that you don't have to react to every thought, that you don't have to believe everything your mind tells you. You start to create a sense of inner peace, even in the midst of chaos. But it's not just about formal meditation. You can find moments of stillness throughout your day, whether it's taking a few deep breaths before responding to someone, pausing for a moment of silence before making a decision, or simply becoming present in whatever you are doing. These moments of stillness, though small, can create a profound shift in your experience. When you step out of the noise, even for a brief moment, you start to recalibrate. You start to align with the deeper sense of awareness that is always available to you. The more you practice stepping out of the noise, the more you begin to see how much of it is unnecessary. A lot of the thoughts we have are not even relevant to our current situation. They are remnants of past experiences, worries about the future, or judgments about things that don't matter. They clutter our minds and prevent us from living fully in the moment. When you start to quiet the mind, you begin to create space for the things that truly matter: clarity, creativity, connection, peace. This quieting of the mind is not just about reducing mental noise, it is about tuning into the deeper currents of life. When you stop listening to the constant chatter of the mind, you begin to listen to the subtler forces at play in your life. You begin to notice the synchronicities, the opportunities, the small moments of grace that are always around you. You begin to hear the quiet voice of your intuition, which has always been there but often gets drowned out by the noise of your thoughts. You begin to experience life with more presence, more depth, more clarity. When you learn to silence the inner chatter, you not only gain peace, but you also tap into a greater sense of purpose. The constant noise in the mind distracts you from the deeper desires, from the soul's calling. When the noise quiets, you can hear that calling more clearly. You can move with intention, not because you are following the demands of the mind, but because you are following your inner truth. And it is from this place of truth that you can create a life that is authentic, fulfilling, and aligned with your deepest values. Learning to quiet the mind is not about escaping life, but about embracing it fully. It's about removing the filters, the judgments, the distractions, and experiencing the world as it is in its raw, unfiltered beauty. It's about living from a place of clarity, not confusion. And in that clarity, everything becomes more vivid, more meaningful, more alive. In the course of this exploration, we have touched upon the essential elements that shape our inner and outer worlds. We've recognized how often we hinder our own growth and happiness by engaging in self-defeating habits like blaming, waiting for the perfect moment, controlling the uncontrollable, and allowing the constant noise of our minds to dominate our lives. Each of these behaviors keeps us tethered to patterns of fear, insecurity, and limitation, making it difficult to experience life in its full depth and beauty. But within each of us lies the potential for transformation. The path to inner peace and external clarity begins with awareness, the willingness to observe our thoughts and behaviors, to release what no longer serves us, and to embrace the present moment with open hands. This process is not about perfection, it is about courage. The courage to step away from blame, control, and the illusion of waiting, and to enter a state of pure engagement with life. By learning to let go of the need for control, by quieting the mental chatter, and by recognizing that the perfect time is always now, we open ourselves to a more meaningful and connected existence. This is not just a path to personal freedom, but a way of living that enhances our relationships, our work, and our ability to navigate the uncertainties of life with grace and wisdom. The journey is ongoing, and it requires patience, but every step taken towards releasing